It's month 4 of a 6-month deployment beneath the contested waters of the South China Sea, and Petty Officer 3rd Class Jackson crawls into a sleeping space that his shipmates grimly call the Coffin. At 22 years old, Jackson is experiencing something that would shatter most civilians within days, sleeping in an aluminum box barely 6 feet long, 2 feet wide, and 18 inches high, while sharing this intimate space with 2 other sailors across rotating watch schedules. The sheets are still warm from the previous occupant, carrying the scent and body heat of a man he's never spoken to, but whose sleeping habits he knows better than his own family's. This is hot racking. 3 guys to every 2 beds aboard a nuclear submarine operating 400 feet beneath enemy waters where detection could trigger an international incident or worse. Jackson's submarine, like every fast attack vessel in the U.S. Navy, has been designed for maximum stealth and firepower, not human comfort. The result is a floating nightmare where 130 sailors live in conditions so extreme they would violate every civilian building code for human habitation. The racks themselves, triple-stacked aluminum frames that sailors describe as coffins with curtains, are hardly ever unoccupied. As one watch section sleeps, another works, and a third maintains the sophisticated systems that keep their submarine invisible to hostile forces patrolling overhead. Head clearance isn't generous, and the psychological impact of sleeping in what amounts to a metal tomb becomes overwhelming for sailors who must endure these conditions for half a year without seeing sunlight, breathing fresh air, or experiencing any privacy whatsoever. Night and day become meaningless concepts in this artificial world where time is measured only by the endless series of 8-hour shifts. Sailors joke that it's not gay if you're underway, a dark humor defense mechanism against the intimate reality of sharing beds with strangers while conducting the most dangerous missions in military history. Today, we're revealing the shocking truth about how America's submarine sailors survive 6 months of sleeping in coffin-like beds, sharing intimate spaces with strangers, and maintaining their sanity while operating beneath the world's most hostile waters. The mathematics of submarine hot racking are as brutal as they are simple. 3 sailors, 2 beds, and a rotation system that has persisted since the 16th century when space aboard warships was measured in inches rather than feet. What makes this arrangement particularly cruel in the modern era is that these aren't just shared sleeping spaces. They're aluminum coffins stacked 3 high where grown men must crawl in feet, first like sliding into morgue drawers, all while their submarine operates in waters where enemy forces would sink them without hesitation if discovered. The lowest-ranking crew members bear the burden of this medieval practice, a reality that adds psychological humiliation to the already extreme physical discomfort. These junior sailors, many of them teenagers on their first deployment, must surrender any claim to private sleeping space and accept that their most intimate moments, sleep, dreams, and the vulnerability that comes with rest will be shared with strangers who may not even speak the same language or come from the same cultural background. The physical construction of these coffin-like racks reveals the submarine's ruthless prioritization of weapons and machinery over human comfort. Each sleeping space consists of an aluminum frame supporting a mattress barely 2 inches thick, enclosed on 5 sides with only a narrow opening protected by a privacy curtain that provides psychological comfort rather than actual isolation. The dimensions are unnervingly precise: 6 feet 2 inches long, 2 feet wide, and exactly 18 inches from mattress to ceiling. Measurements that force even average-sized sailors to sleep in contorted positions that would be considered torture in civilian contexts. Head clearance isn't generous in any of the 3 rack levels, but each position offers its own unique form of misery. Bottom racks collect dust, debris, and the occasional flood of condensation or seawater, forcing occupants to sleep inches from the deck, where they can hear every footstep and mechanical vibration throughout the submarine. Middle racks offer the best combination of accessibility and psychological comfort, making them the domain of more senior petty officers who have earned the privilege through years of service and sacrifice. Top racks provide slightly more headroom but require athletic ability to access and present nightmare scenarios during emergency evacuations when sailors might need to exit their sleeping spaces in complete darkness while the submarine maneuvers violently to avoid enemy contact. The rotation system operates with military precision that masks its psychological brutality. As one sailor completes his 8-hour watch, he finds his designated rack occupied by a shipmate who may be snoring, talking in his sleep, or suffering from the nightmares that plague many submariners during extended deployments in enemy waters. The incoming sleeper must wait, sometimes for hours, before crawling into sheets still warm from another man's body, into a space that retains the intimate scents, sounds, and presence of strangers who have become unwilling bedfellows in America's most claustrophobic military environment. Life aboard a submarine operates in a temporal void where night and day become meaningless concepts, replaced by an endless series of 8-hour shifts that systematically destroy every natural human rhythm developed over millions of years of evolution. For submariners sleeping in coffin-like racks while their vessel operates beneath enemy waters, this artificial schedule becomes a form of psychological warfare waged against their own bodies and minds. The submarine's watch rotation divides the crew into 3 sections, each working 8-hour shifts around the clock while the vessel maintains its covert operations in hostile territories. This means that at any given moment, 1/3 of the crew is working, 1/3 is conducting maintenance or studying for advancement, and 1/3 is attempting to sleep in aluminum coffins stacked throughout the submarine like bodies in a morgue. The system ensures continuous operation but creates a living hell for sailors whose biological clocks become completely disconnected from any natural rhythm. Sleep becomes a precious commodity that sailors must steal in fragments between duty assignments, emergency drills, and the constant noise of machinery that never stops aboard an operational submarine. The artificial lighting, designed for functionality rather than human comfort, bathes the submarine in harsh fluorescent glare that tricks the brain into believing it's perpetually daytime. Melatonin production, the hormone that regulates natural sleep cycles, becomes completely disrupted as sailors spend months without seeing sunlight or experiencing the darkness that signals rest time to human physiology. The psychological impact of this temporal displacement compounds the already extreme stress of sleeping in coffin-like conditions while operating in enemy waters where detection could prove fatal. Sailors report feeling like they're trapped in a recurring nightmare where time has no meaning, where exhaustion becomes a permanent state, and where the simple act of falling asleep requires conscious effort rather than natural relaxation. Sleep deprivation accumulates over weeks and months, creating cognitive impairment that affects everything from reaction times to decision-making abilities. Medical personnel aboard submarines monitor crew members for signs of severe sleep disruption, but the demands of covert operations often prevent implementing adequate countermeasures. Sailors develop their own coping mechanisms. Some use meditation techniques practiced in their cramped racks. Others rely on caffeine consumption that further disrupts their already chaotic sleep patterns, and many simply accept chronic exhaustion as the price of serving aboard America's most sophisticated underwater weapons platforms. The endless 8-hour cycle creates a form of institutionalized sleep deprivation that would be considered inhumane in civilian contexts but becomes normalized aboard submarines where operational effectiveness takes precedence over human comfort. Sailors joke grimly about losing track of days, weeks, and sometimes even months as they rotate between work, maintenance, and rest in coffin-like spaces that offer no escape from the submarine's artificial environment. The true magnitude of what submariners endure becomes clear when examining the record-breaking deployments that push human endurance beyond all reasonable limits. In 2023, a Royal Navy submarine completed a 195-day patrol, 6 months completely underwater without surfacing, without seeing sunlight, and without breathing fresh air. The vessel emerged from the depths completely caked in algae, a visual testament to the extraordinary length of time these warriors spent beneath hostile waters in conditions that military psychologists describe as longer than humans should spend in an isolated and confined environment. This record-breaking deployment required sailors to sleep in coffin-like racks for 195 consecutive days, while their submarine conducted intelligence operations in waters where enemy forces actively searched for their presence. The psychological and physical toll of such extended confinement defies civilian comprehension. Imagine spending more than 6 months in a space smaller than most prison cells, sharing that space with strangers, breathing recycled air, and knowing that discovery by enemy forces could result in death or international incident. Before each deployment, submarines must load everything their crew will need for 6 months at sea: food, spare parts, personal supplies, and medical equipment that must sustain 130-plus sailors through conditions that test the absolute limits of human endurance. The loading process itself becomes a logistical nightmare, as every cubic inch of space not occupied by weapon systems or nuclear machinery must serve multiple purposes, including storage for the supplies that will keep the crew alive during months of isolation beneath enemy waters. The physical deterioration that occurs during these extended deployments is both predictable and devastating. Sailors lose muscle mass from the inability to exercise properly in confined spaces, develop vitamin D deficiency from months without sunlight, and experience bone density loss that can take years to reverse. Some crew members lose significant weight due to appetite suppression caused by the combination of artificial lighting, poor sleep quality, and the psychological stress of living in coffin-like conditions while conducting covert operations. Mental health challenges become equally severe as the deployment stretches into its 4th, 5th, and 6th months. Crew members develop claustrophobia, depression, and anxiety disorders that persist long after returning to shore. The submarine's medical personnel monitor for signs of psychological breakdown, but their ability to provide meaningful intervention is limited by the confined environment and the operational security requirements that prevent communication with shore-based mental health professionals. The most disturbing aspect of these record-breaking deployments is that they represent the new normal rather than exceptional circumstances. As geopolitical tensions increase and submarine operations expand into more contested waters, crews are routinely asked to endure conditions that previous generations of submariners would have considered impossible to survive, sleeping in aluminum coffins while their vessels conduct missions that could reshape international relations. The ultimate test of what human beings can endure in coffin-like sleeping conditions came during an extreme deployment that stretched for 30 months, over 800 days away from home, family, and any semblance of normal human existence. This extraordinary mission required sailors to sleep in aluminum racks barely larger than burial chambers while conducting operations so sensitive that crew members couldn't communicate with loved ones for periods that destroyed marriages, missed children's births, and created psychological trauma that persisted for decades after returning to shore. The financial compensation for such extreme sacrifices reveals both the military's recognition of these conditions' brutality and society's disconnect from what submariners actually endure. Sailors receive extra pay for extended periods at sea, but veteran advocacy groups argue that no amount of money can compensate for the psychological damage inflicted by months of sleeping in coffin-like spaces while operating in hostile waters where detection could prove fatal. The suicide rates among submarine veterans significantly exceed those of other military branches, a statistic that reflects the long-term mental health consequences of enduring conditions that would break most civilians within days. Communication blackouts during these deployments create additional psychological torture as submariners lose touch with the outside world completely. They miss births, deaths, graduations, and other life events that define human existence, all while sleeping in aluminum tombs and sharing intimate spaces with strangers who become closer than family through shared misery. Some sailors return home to find their marriages destroyed, their children grown beyond recognition, and their own identities fundamentally altered by months of living in conditions designed to strip away individual humanity. The post-deployment recovery process reveals the true cost of sleeping in coffin-like conditions for extended periods. Many submariners require months of psychological counseling to readjust to civilian sleeping arrangements, experiencing panic attacks in normal bedrooms that feel impossibly large after months in aluminum coffins. sleep disorders become chronic problems as former submariners struggle with insomnia, nightmares, and claustrophobia that can persist for years after their service ends. Yet these extraordinary sacrifices serve a critical national security purpose that justifies the human cost in ways that most Americans will never fully understand. Submarine operations in enemy waters gather intelligence that prevents conflicts, monitor hostile military activities that could threaten American interests, and maintain the underwater deterrent that has helped preserve global stability for decades. The sailors who endure months of sleeping in coffin-like conditions while their submarines operate beneath contested waters represent the ultimate expression of military service. Warriors who sacrifice their physical and mental health to protect a nation that remains largely unaware of the price they pay. The silent service continues to attract volunteers who willingly accept these extreme conditions, sleeping in aluminum coffins for months at a time because they understand that their sacrifice protects freedoms that most Americans take for granted. As we surface from this harrowing journey into the most extreme living conditions ever endured by military personnel, the extraordinary resilience of the human spirit becomes undeniably clear. For 6 months, 184 days of complete isolation from sunlight, fresh air, and normal human contact, American submariners slept in aluminum coffins barely larger than burial chambers while conducting operations beneath enemy waters that could determine the course of international relations. The fact that they not only survive these conditions but maintain peak operational effectiveness while sharing beds with strangers defies every reasonable expectation of human endurance. The mathematics of their sacrifice tell a story that numbers alone cannot fully convey. 3 sailors rotating between 2 beds, sleeping spaces measuring just 6 feet by 2 feet by 18 inches, deployment stretching 195 days beneath hostile waters, and psychological trauma that persists for decades after their service ends. Some endure deployments lasting 800 days away from home, missing births, deaths, graduations, and marriages that crumble under the weight of their absence. Yet these stark statistics fail to capture the true magnitude of what these underwater warriors endure in service to their country. The hot racking system that forces submariners to sleep in sheets still warm from previous occupants represents far more than mere space conservation. It embodies the complete subordination of individual dignity to collective mission success. These sailors crawl into aluminum tombs knowing they will share the most intimate aspects of human existence with strangers, breathing recycled air while enemy naval forces patrol overhead, completely unaware of the American presence conducting intelligence operations that could prevent the next global conflict. The psychological toll of these extreme conditions extends far beyond the deployment itself. Veterans describe returning home to families they no longer recognize, struggling with panic attacks in normal bedrooms that feel impossibly large after months in coffin-like racks, and battling sleep disorders that can persist for years. The suicide rates among submarine veterans significantly exceed those of other military branches, a sobering testament to the long-term mental health consequences of enduring conditions that would be considered torture in civilian contexts. Yet, perhaps most remarkably, the submarine community continues to attract volunteers despite widespread knowledge of these brutal realities. Young sailors willingly sign up for duty aboard vessels where they will sleep in coffin-like racks, share beds with strangers, and endure months of isolation beneath waters where detection could prove fatal. Their motivation transcends financial compensation or career advancement. It reflects a dedication to national service that few civilians can comprehend, a willingness to sacrifice their physical and mental well-being for the security of a nation that remains largely unaware of their extraordinary contribution. The strategic importance of their sacrifice cannot be overstated. These submarine operations gather intelligence that prevents conflicts before they begin, monitor hostile military activities that threaten American interests worldwide, and maintain the underwater deterrent that has helped preserve global stability for generations. The sailors sleeping in aluminum coffins beneath contested waters today are conducting missions so sensitive that their success or failure could reshape international relations for decades to come. The next time you lie down in your comfortable bed with privacy, fresh air, the ability to stretch fully, and the freedom to move without restriction, remember the submariners who, at that very moment, are crawling into aluminum coffins 400 feet beneath enemy seas. They are enduring conditions that would shatter most civilians within days, conducting missions that protect American interests in every corner of the globe, and maintaining the silent vigil that ensures our national security while most of us sleep peacefully, blissfully unaware of their sacrifice. In the crushing depths of the world's most dangerous waters, America's submarine sailors continue their extraordinary vigil, sleeping in coffins to keep the rest of us free.